How did your series of matches come with the rock and roll?
It was a natural. See, the rock and roll in Memphis, once again, were the second bananas to the Fabs. Because the Rock and Roll Express originally was put together, was Jimmy Hart's idea, as I recall, at least he took credit for it. Although then later Lawler took credit for it, later Jarrett took credit for it. But the Fabs couldn't, they were running 2 towns a night in the Memphis territory at that point because business was so good. The Fabs couldn't be in both places, so they had the junior Fabs. The Rock and Roll Express, the teeny bopper, and they were a little light. They were like Fabs light because the Fabs were like they had the beards and they have jeans and everything. And we watched the Stan. I'm sorry, Steve. I love you too. But when I did the Rock and Rumble this summer, we went back and watched the old videos that were revolutionary and groundbreaking, and all the guys would have goosebumps on their arms. I was like, this shit's gonna catch on. Music videos, they're gay as shit now when you watch them. And we didn't realize it at the time. And now nobody saw it that way. It's just, it's amazing what a difference fit. But anyway. So the Fabs were kind of rough, whereas the Rock and Roll were like, hey, rock and roll is king. And, so they went to spot shows. But then when they went to a place where the Fabs hadn't been, and all of a sudden here's a young, good-looking babyface tag team with one guy that can sell like crazy. Because let's face it, Riggy Morton is the classic worker of all time as a babyface. One guy can sell like crazy, and the other guy takes the tag, and they're vulnerable, and they're cute, and they're like puppies, and we want to hug them. And those son of a bitch Midnight Express are trying to kill them, and they made Ricky bleed. Let's shoot him with it,
Right.
It was perfect. I don't think the Fabs would have got over in Louisiana because it was just the people were so harsh and rough, and I mean the Cajun girls would come out, so you're gonna fuck me or what, and the guys would have the knives hanging off their belt, and fucking knives stuck through their chest, to hold them. It was their scabbard, just like that. And here's the rock and roll, and they're over like God. And the girls are screaming so loud that you'd be standing like this to the people you were teaming with in the ring, and you were screaming at each other. You couldn't hear over the high-pitched squeals like the Beatles. So it was natural. Watts had said to Dennis, do you have a name for a tag team? And then said, well, me and Randy Rose and Norville Austin in Continental a couple of years ago used Midnight Express. That's great. I love it. Do that. And see, I later found out Watts had come up to Dennis because Dennis is the only one Watts knew. Watts didn't know Bobby Eaton, and Bobby don't say boo to a goose, don't talk to nobody. He's quiet. And I was scared, so Watts was like, Bobby Eaton's a pretty good worker right here, right? Yeah, absolutely. Cornette, can he talk? They said he can talk his ass off. Now, Dennis is lobbying for a job. I don't know whether he was really confident in my abilities at that point or not, but, he's wanting the job, right? Because he's going from Memphis to Mid-South. And, okay, let's make y'all a team. So it was natural. There's the Rock and Roll Express in Memphis. Bring the rock and roll in to be the evil or the good counterpoint to our evil. And, I mean, that's the same thing that Dusty did. When the first time I met Dusty, we worked in a Superdome, and they brought Dusty in because he was an international star and would come to the Superdome. How's this for a tag team? Dusty Rhodes and Sonny King. God, worst match the Midnight Express ever had. And not because of Dusty, because Dusty would do the right things. He didn't look great, but he knew what to do, but you couldn't get anything out of Sonny King. But Dusty said, these guys, he always liked to have the heels. Because if you noticed, he had Nikita as a worker, the Road Warriors, who at the time were very green, only 3 years in the business. He had, the baby faces weren't really carrying the ball. He had Tully, he had Arn, he had Ole, he had Flair, then he had the Midnight. He always went for the heels that could really go, so that way he could get more heat on. The more heat you have on the heels, the more your baby faces are over. And Dusty's the top baby face of them all. Very smart man. So when he saw us, he's like, yeah, when y'all finish up, I want you to come to the Carolinas. Which is another story I'll digress on here in a second. But just to let you know, we did when we did the scaffold matches with the Rock and Roll.
I was going to ask you about that.
So that was, the whole year was basically they got us ready to go with the Rock and Roll. See, at first Watts thought after the last Stampede, well, I've juiced him, I've beat him, I've put a diaper and a dress on the manager, I'll have to finish him up. We had more heat going out than we did going in because we weren't big football playing kick-ass. I was a little chicken shit, mama's boy. They didn't know I was gay, fucking annoying at any rate. And Bobby and Dennis are smaller than some of the fans. We had more heat because we actually came back the next week. We didn't run off. Bastards. You should have left. So that's when they did the Rock and Roll. And then the Rock and Roll drew almost as well as the last Stampede, but on a longer term basis. And the spot, we did $35,000 in Bogalusa, Louisiana at a football field at the Rock and Roll Express in 1984. It was just incredible. So the first time around, he had, we ended up beating them in a loser leave town, and they went back to Memphis for 3 months. So he just kept feeding us teams, and then when they came back, now it was our turn. We did another program, more business, blow off in the scaffold match. We take the fall, and we got to leave because you couldn't keep going forever; it gets stale. So another round of record business. The last Stampede, by the way, holds the record in Mid-South in that territory. It'll never be. They'll never sell out as many buildings in one match in one series as that thing did. Even in the NWA or WCW, WWF, managing the WWF champion. No, that was part of the package. Last Stampede was all us. $1.2 million for 14 shows in Louisiana and Texas and Oklahoma and Mississippi, for God's sake. They locked the front gates of the Barton Coliseum in Little Rock at the fairgrounds at 7:30, 30 minutes before the show started because they couldn't get more people in the building. We drew better than Kenny Rogers in Little Rock. The last time that we did $70,000 in Jackson, Mississippi, the last time they had that many people in that building, the house was $18,000 because the tickets were only $2. The only town that we didn't have the record in was in the Superdome. We missed Michael Hayes and the Junkyard Dogs record, dog collar chain, after they blinded him, $3,000. Michael, I hate you. But that was.
Your dental bills.
Yeah, he knocked his tooth out. But he actually hit me on top of the head. You know.
He'd be a good interview, by the way.
Oh, he'd be, yeah. But so that's the thing is it was fabulous to be doing that. Actually, that match, they didn't care what else was on the card for that one time. They wanted to see Watts kill us, and he did every night. But that's my favorite thing I've ever done in the business overall. But so anyway, the Rock and Roll Express, we did the scaffold matches and did another round of great business, and then we were going to leave, and they told us they were finishing us up like 6 weeks before they did because the tape had to go around, and so we called Jimmy Crockett and said, well, we're finishing up here, so we'd like to come to Charlotte. Oh, great. That's they got on.
You worked with Fantastic so a little bit.
That was in the middle. That was in between Rock and Roll. I mean, we did so much stuff. I'll run yet another tape.